Hi everyone, welcome back. Well, it's been kind of a couple of very busy days, but I'm trying to work on this a little bit. I did come in here and I added in the horseman or the other cowboy and a couple cows. I might put a few, I'm going to put a few very distant one here to help me establish some distance. I then went ahead and gave some areas like this cow here a second coat, which I'm going to show you on this forward cow what I did. And then I added a little bit more second coat up here and then just did the sky up here just a few minutes ago. Pure acrylic so it dries so I can show you the next steps on there, okay? But what I got to do before we really get into it, let's just, I took a couple of little snippets of what some of the stuff I did as I painted in the cows, just simple like we did these cows. And I'd just like to show you those for just a minute, then we'll come back and we'll start working on it again. So let's take a look. Okay, so we've got it to that point. Now, before I go any further, what I want to do, I'm not done up here. There's some more stuff that I want to do up here, but I'm going to push it back a little bit. And I showed you this in one of the other Westerns. I think it was the Wranglers or something, the Horse Wranglers, how we push it back just a bit. I'm going to take a bigger brush, and I'm going to take a light coat of extender. Now, I do like sometimes, like, if you don't like the rough look, I like the rough casual look, because when I hang it on the wall and I step back 6 to 8 feet, the eye, because of optical blending, blends that, and I like that. But if you don't and you want to have things a little smoother, you give it a coat of extender, and then you can just paint right up on top of the coat of extender. This will really help slow down the drying time of stuff of your paints and give you lots of working time. You see, I'm just working it in here so it's nice and even. There's no puddles or anything here on the surface. I just want a nice even coat of it. And you can see immediately how it wakes up the colors. I mean, look down here onto this cow and stuff here, how it just wakes up the colors. This is what it's going to look like when it gets varnished. And so sometimes when I'm painting, if I want to see what's actually going to happen, how much underglow do you actually see in that area, the colors, I'll give a quick coat of extender, because that's what the varnish is going to bring out. So while this is wet here, I'm going to take like my 3/4 inch brush. Now this is the sky I made earlier, and we were keeping that sky, and if you look at there, it's right around an 8. See how it's right up there as an 8. And so I want to add some atmosphere. So I want to really mix up a sky. I'm going to use some extender here. Sometimes I tell you, you can add some glazing medium to this. I'll show you in other videos, glazing medium. Give it a coat of multi-surface sealer to protect it. Lots of different ways. I'm going to mix up a little bit lighter, and this is still a little wet right here, so I might be able to just do that. But a little blue, a little violet here. Sometimes I like it a little bit more blue. What I'm going to do is put on atmosphere. So I'm going to mix some extender in here. Now, what you don't want to do, and I want it just a touch lighter. So it's just a little bit lighter. Can be slightly different color. This is a little bit more violet. So let's add just a tiny bit more blue to it. Get that blue. I like the blue in the atmosphere. You want it just a touch lighter, because it's going to dry a touch darker. Now, what you don't want to do is get it too light, like an entire value or so lighter, because that'll make it look cloudy. It's going to look a little cloudy when you put it on, but we'll glaze that out, or it will dry out as it's drying. Now, I'll start right up here, and I'm just going to lightly wash back down like this over that. See how it pushes that? Let's start first in this back corner. So I'll start up into the sky and wash down over the edge of that ridge line there. And you see how it adds the atmosphere back there to it. Okay, so I'll wash, and what I do is I lighten the pressure as I come forward here. I want a little bit up in here, but I want it, and maybe a little bit for like casting, atmosphere into the valleys and stuff. I like how Dustin Van Witchell calls it humidity in the air. So a little bit like down in the valley, let some of that point come back up, but you can see, the difference there. Maybe just a touch more blue. So sometimes I'll make it a little bit darker in some areas, like right through here. Whoops, that's a little too much. So wipe my brush here a bit. Let's just drag that right over this back edge here. As you can see, it pushes, it gets rid of some of that, and that's a little too much there, so I'll just wipe it back here. But it gets rid of some of those shadows, brings a harmony, a lightness to it here. So a little bit darker there. And you could see it really adds some tremendous depth in there. So if you think you got an area and it's not really, you look at that, it's not really all that dark, but that can really help. And you can take some of this. if I want to push back some of this hill lightly right here like this. So I just add a little bit of the sky, or what we call the atmosphere, to it. So I'll push a little atmosphere right back here. Not all the way down, because we don't need it all the way down. But see how that pushes it back just a bit. And you look at it like this, yeah, it's kind of like you're putting the sky, a thin veil of the sky right over, and it's pushing it a little further back. So sometimes I will do this, and, you see me in other videos, I do this in a mix, and the mix of the tones, and then sometimes I will do this afterwards like this to add some additional depth to those back mountains and stuff. Now, we can come in here and let's add a little burnt sienna, a little green, a little blue here. Model this up a little, and we'll add maybe a little bit of our beige and stuff here. We'll get some of those other colors here, right up in here. This is really easy to do, like these little valley colors here. Really easy to do because I've got that extender on there right now. So maybe just some movement, color, movement, verticals, horizontals, ideas of trees, angles coming up a bit here that just angle into that little valley there. Just quick statements here. Quick statements, a little bit here, like that, and little touches of those brown colors into some of my greens here, like that. That works pretty good. Let's take a bit of this right up over onto this side, maybe some rocky little edges and stuff there. Just adds a bit more interest. Here, let's and we had left a few streaks in here, so whoop, that's a little too dark. We do want, one of the things, and I told you I was out in Nebraska, out in the very back hills in Nebraska, and it was so pretty because the greens were turning so brown. And now, all the geese are flying over, heading south, and everything. It's just, and everything is really brown now. It just happens in a few weeks, but putting a little bit of the green in there as the grasses are changing over is kind of nice, kind of neat here. There we go. Maybe a little bit of light streaking back in there. How much detail you put in here, this is all up to you. I'm not going to go wild and crazy, but I do like some movement and stuff back here because I feel that adds even more to the overall painting here. I like that kind of stuff. I'm going to, and like I showed you before, I got left a little bit of paint here on my knife, so I get to take that right back off there. If you don't get a good expression with the knife, so don't leave any blobs of paint on it. Let's just take I love the knife, how it adds interest and stuff, broken color interest and stuff to the painting here, like that. So it makes broken color tones better and breaks and fractures edges better than a lot of different things, and that's why I like it here. So we'll add a bit of that just with the knife and roll it around. Don't try not to have like a super straight line like I have here too. Undulate the line a little bit. Maybe this line goes up and through and into some trees right there or something. And so rather than having just a real solid straight line there, back like this, you can undulate it a little bit, and that just adds more visual interest rather than just straight lines. And that's the kind of stuff I look for. So a little bit here, a little bit right up there like that, just breaking some of those tree lines there, just adds a bit more. That's real harsh, sharp line right there by him, and I want to break that a bit. So I'm watching my edges, as I come forward here. That's better. That's going to, by blurring that line slightly there, that's going to bring him farther forward as we paint him. See? So let's grab a little bit more dark right up through here. You know, maybe this comes up a little bit more so you see more color of it coming up front. Let's grab a little yellows and beiges here, some white. Model that in here. And we'll grab a little greens with that here. And see, I love this. So I put that on there like that. Now, you've seen me before use the paper towel. I'm going to use the knife and smash and push these edges so I can create some of that interest that's all along in there. See, like that. Now, that's a little bit blue-green there, so I'm going to take a little bit of my browns and my yellows, and sometimes I'll just use the paper towel, big old blob of phthalo there that got in the way here, and just drag some of that over, hit my cowboy there. I'll fix that here. And I want to, now see, the other thing is I painted full color tone on this cowboy here, and I didn't atmospheric or put atmosphere on him. So let's do that a little bit. Let's push him back just a little bit. Now, how do you push him back? Do you use the blue of the sky? You could, if you're going to put that on the ground as well. To make them recede, you follow the good rule of art. To anything to recede, and remember this, is that you're making it more like the background. As colors have come forward, they become less like the background. As colors recede, they become more like the background, okay? So the background around him is this light brown. And so if I come in here and I start working this light brown like this into some of this ground around him, some of these streaks, right? As I go over him with this light yellow brown slightly, just lightly like this, he pushes back, see? He goes further back because you're taking away less color. Now, I can also just lightly with my brush and a little water pull just a couple of little areas of him farther forward. See, just a couple of little taps and he comes forward a bit. So let's take this light brown here, light yellow brown, beige, yellow, and white. And let's just go right over the horse and everything right there. Add some of these nice ground movement and some of that right over him in a cloudy little thing there. See? And that pushes him a little further back. I like that. There we go. Just back like that. Get rid of a little bit of that there. Now that will dry. So you see he pushes way back there. Do you want him that far back? Well, kind of so, because I want this about this guy. But again, I can take that damp brush and just bring a few areas maybe out. Just a few touches of it out here. Bringing like his front of his hat and face there. Just a little bit here. And just keep him very much understated. So that pushes him back there. Maybe we take brown, a little yellow, a little white here. Anything that's like, now sometimes in good westerns, of course I don't have that here, but in good westerns we can do that with dust into the air as well. So if you're going to do a lot of dust, let's make sure we put some extender right over here, right? Let's just finish this right up here. So I can soften that out, see? And that's a glaze of a color there. So he's pushed back a little bit. Let's push back just a bit of this cow. Just a bit here. And this might, you know, when it dries, the colors will come back just a bit. Let's push back to back here. Maybe this edge here of him. Here, just a bit. So they're further back there, and you're coming into the cows. Let this front shoulder, that right there, come forward. Maybe a little bit right in here. Pull it back just a bit. Leave those edges. But this is what you're doing. Now, I do want to have a few ideas of some taps of some verticals, which will be the feeling of the grasses and stuff up there. So just a few taps of that gives a feeling of the grasses here. And small, because we're going to do larger ones up here. So smaller little taps back here. Here. A little bit of that grasses and stuff up here. Ideas of that would be good. Okay. And then we'll start coming farther forward now. So you can see that's a great way to add a lot of really nice depth and stuff like that to your paintings pretty quickly. So if you feel you got that right back up there, just a little bit, maybe too dark right in there, just glaze on a little light, and you can do that afterwards, and that will push some of that back. Let's push just a bit of this back. Here, leave that nice mottled color, but push a little bit of that back so it's a little darker there, and then goes back up along that hillside right there. That looks pretty good. You know, and again, how much you add, that's up to you, okay? You're the artist, that's up to you. Let's go in and let's, so we have to give a second coat. So I gave a second coat to this cow here, and you can see how he really pops forward. And I really like this softer, and this one is a little bit more chunky. So, and that's what I want to do, maybe pull in him a little bit. We could even glaze back and you know, just a bit of this ground right over his edge, right over here. Push that back so that softens as it goes off to that side of the edge. See how that recedes his edge there, and then his face and everything here come farther forward. That's what we're doing. This is a glazing technique that does that. And so a little bit of extender onto that, and just glaze that back like that onto that edge. And your eye shifts from that back edge more to the front of him up here. But you use whatever color is right in there in the background. That's what you're doing. All right, so let's continue forward here. I want to work on the rider. I want to pop up his Levi jacket there and stuff. And, you know, so we'll continue with that. And we have all of our jackets there. We have all of those things there to look at. I just turned on the monitor there. So let's take like an 8 or a 10. Let's take some of our blues and our violets here. And I wanted a bit grayer here, not quite so bright. So a little burnt sienna into that. Let's use open medium this time coming into this. This will keep it wet, and we can model it really easy here. So we'll drop not quite that edge there. I really want to start a little bit darker. I work the shadows and then the highlights. So a little darker, a little violet, a little more burnt sienna, not as much white. We'll add the open medium, but remember, we still want shadows a little bit darker. So that's a little bit more blue than the previous color I used, and that's great. You want some variation in it. So let's pull down the length of his arm here to develop a better bit on his elbow there. This might be a little too big for what I'm going to try to do here. So let's go down. That was a 10, so I'm going to go down to my 8 here and use this older 8. This doesn't have a nice chisel on it at all, but it's great for painting this kind of stuff. So let's put that in. Change the color a little bit every time. Model it up a bit, change it up. Okay, don't paint out everything you did before, because that is just a waste of time. We're just adding some tones to it. That's what we want to do. So let's add a little light right in here, right in there like that. Okay, just giving him a little more color here. And there we go. There, just like that. That's good. And we'll then lighten up a bit a little lighter, a little grayer, some of these tones change. Before, in a lot of the Westerns, when I paint jackets and arms and all of that kind of stuff with everything coming forward and everything, I will, many times, I have this arm folded up over that too. Sometimes I'll take this in the back there too, just a bit, just to bring a little harmony to the two of them. But, I'll carry like the horse colors up into his jacket as well, because that gives a nice variation of color here. There we go. And you can see you get it's more opaque this time. It's getting a little bit more structure to the wrinkles and stuff. That's what we're doing. Let's go a little bit lighter. But I follow a lot of Sargent who always says you use as large a brush as possible to make that statement. And that's generally what I do, is I use a very large brush as possible. So this number 8 is quite nice. A 6 would be really easy, but sometimes a 6, you will have to go in there and make several marks. And if you're like me, a left brain painter, I'm not a creative painter, I'm a logical painter. And so I'll make the same repetitive marks if I'm not careful. So let's bring this shoulder over just a bit more. Leave a bit more of an edge. Drop that line down there like that. That's pretty good. So you get a good light and dark on him here. A little bit of blue, a little different color up here. Leave that wrinkle right in there. There, like that. Get a little more blue. Put in the flat front of his jacket, leave a few little lines coming back like that. And I love to constantly mix into this so my colors change a bit. Let's put a little bit of red violet into that as well. Get that nice shadow in there. Here. Some of those wrinkles right there on his elbow there. That's good. Maybe a little bit underneath that collar here, like that. If he has a pocket or anything, sometimes we drop a little shadow underneath the pocket line there. And that's up to you how much you want to put in to that. That looks pretty good on him. Let's drop in even some of this green and brown. A little different. Here, don't make his jacket real dirty, but get some of those other tones in there. Nice big tone coming from that shadow of his elbow here, like that. And that shadow that divides his shoulder line here. There, up like that. Squares him up a bit. Let's get back up over to a little bit of light, a little violet, blue, some of this light, sometimes a little yellow in there or a little more burnt sienna to give it a grayer color. And as you get lighter and as you get darker, in other words, you head to both ends of the scale, you do your marks smaller. That's what we do. So we'll express a little bit there, here like that. That's pretty good. I like that bit of light, not quite as light as that side, but we'll pull just a bit down here. And I took out too much of that front, the flat. You want a certain amount of flatness right here, which gives him his chest, so you don't want to take too much of that out. But a little bit more shadow. It's just kind of fun, and play with it back and forth. Now, that goes against some of the things I've said in the past of, you make very calculated marks, and you do, like with roses and stuff. I don't play with them. I make very calculated marks. And so as you're finishing some of this, you make more calculated marks about your shadows and expressions of your shadows and lights. A little bit more calculated with it. But right now you can play just a bit with this and see if you like that expression of shadow. Let's push just a touch of that light, like hitting right in there. you know, boom, right like that. That looks pretty good hitting that corner. You can, you know, do the three, you know, with a real good fold, fabric fold, you're going to have three values. You can do that if you want. You've seen me do that in a lot of my still lifes and stuff. We talked about the three values in fabric and everything and the folds of fabric. But I'm not going to go too wild and crazy. But you can see he really advances up here. Let's take some of this, bit of this grayer, add some burnt sienna and stuff to it, and we'll drop that to the back here, and we'll go up to a medium value here. We'll touch that in. This is on his collar of his jacket here, so a little bit of that shadow, and then up into a light here. We'll drop right up into the light. Here, just tap. You might, since this is like a sheepskin, you might just tap it a few times to give that rougher look to it. Might even go, let me go a little bit further down size-wise. I'm gonna also go to my filbert. Go down in size to my filbert. I love the filbert because I can tap up onto the point here. Here like that. Make that just a bit rougher looking. Here. I've got a real harsh line there. I want to be careful with my edges. You know, edges are very, very important. Now, maybe a bit of the burnt sienna and red for that idea of his shirt and stuff. The other guy here, I gave up and I ended up painting it out, but a little bit of a scarf right around his neck. Just the impression of it here. Let's just give a little more here. Right there. Maybe a mark or two if you want to emulate that shirt. Just a few marks to give it the look of a plaid or something in there. You don't need to have that much going on in there. What really draws everything is take your blue right into some of that dark green, the red right into some of that dark green, a little violet, a little blue here. Create a dark. Let's be careful here now. Use my stick and use the shadow to like draw a collar, the edge of his neck there, line, the shirt line here. Draw the edge of a collar. So you draw, so shadows, I use shadows, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, I use shadows more like drawing, you know, drawing lines and stuff, and that just it helps a lot. Let's take some burnt sienna and some white. This was this real simple flesh tone. Usually when I have cowboys and I'm drawing on the range, I always put them in the light yellow leather gloves that I have too. But this one I put him in just the flesh tone here. So I'll just put a little bit there for his flesh tone, like this is his hand kind of resting on his hip there, right? And a little bit of the blues and stuff to correct that just a bit here. But blurry edges there. But the color, see how the color brings him out a little bit more. Now, so I like the way that's going. I've got this this a little thick right in here, and I look back up to the sample. It's like, yeah, you should have probably looked a little sooner too. Here, let's just push that heavier shadow back up in there, right up on that edge and down here. That's his shoulder line there, and I like that, and I like this to just pull out. I like the wrinkles coming out, especially when you have like a shoulder or something like that coming out like that. And pull this down a bit. Yep. And this down a bit. There we go. Yeah, and a little bit more of that medium value. Yeah, that's better. That pushes that back into that. We could have this front panel come up like it does in the sample there, a little more right there. And don't take out too much of that shadow. I love to go back and forth like this and just slowly refine. And sometimes, you know, if you're not a figure painter, you know, you can go back and forth like this several times until you find the direction of the figure. Don't, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I can't get it. No, you know, lots of artists have to go back and forth, and I'm one of them that has to go back and forth several times until I find it. Find the right expression of the color and everything. Build up the right amount of paint and the perfect little edge of light that brings it forward and stuff and gives the interest and stuff that you're looking for. And sometimes that takes a few times of pulling through and finding it, you know. So don't think that you can't do it. We can all do it. It's just take a little bit of time. Just do that. That's better. That's better on him right there. I want to widen that show. I took that shadow right back out there again. That's what we do, right? Yeah, I don't worry about it. I just put it back. So I like that. There's a little, you know, blurb of shadow on his shirt right there, widening and then narrowing out. And I kind of like that right there. It kind of pushes that arm a little further back and right into here. Let's just widen that out and let those two just kind of come together there. And a little swooping light here, out like that. Kind of folds that, brings that arm out there. That looks better. It looks better. Now, also to lighten up that jacket area here a bit, I lost my brown that I put in there, so I'll just come back with some real thick medium beige and a little white, and we'll just push that right back in there so we know that belongs in there. Maybe a little bit of shadow on the bottom of that arm. There, like that. We know that goes there, right? There we go. That works. Let's pull that shoulder down just a bit more. There we go. And let's put that light hit that we have on the other shoulder showing up there on him. A little bit more light hit there. And you saw, you know, when I first showed up the little samples and stuff, the little sample videos, and I'll show you that in here. You saw where I did a lot of the final little details with the knife, and I love to do that. So I'll take a light, and I'll mix some of this up here into this light. There's a little sky color there. And I'll use the edge of the knife to push that detail on. And I like that because it gives a rougher look to the painting. It's not a smooth of a stroke. It gets little highs and lows. And I did that on the cow down through here too. So sometimes towards the end of the painting and stuff, or edge of an area and stuff here, I'll put a light on, fracture it, like with that. See that little bit of fracture of that light. And I like that here. And I like that here. Just push that into place there. That works good. Maybe just a bit of that across the front of the jacket here. See, it puts on a little bit of roughness and stuff to that area. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. I think that's probably just a little too much right there. So we'll just soften it back out. Put it on, soften it back out. Back and forth until you find the look that you want. We'll soften it just a little bit. There, like that. That's a pretty good look onto that. A little more blue, blue violet here, blue and violet. A little bit more. Let's go back to my, let's put those in the water so they don't dry too much. Let's go back to my smaller filbert that I like. Here. Get rid of any kind of holidays you have there. So a little bit more of that, a little bit of light into those as we come out here. Add a little touches of this other color, which is a little more blue-green right there. A little bit more light. Pull this angle down here, which is his pants here. And let's set that deeper shadow in there. And if you want to gray it just a bit, that's good too, because it sets out into that shadow. That's the edge of his knee. There, like that. And drop a bit of that shadow here onto the other side. Here, little few wrinkles there. Let's go a little bit lighter. Some of this. Kind of pull up this angle here since his knee's kind of bent into the stirrup. Here, a little bit lighter yet. Some light. And these are the kinds of things, like this is my second time through here now, and I'll probably, will most likely go one more time. But I really light up the knee here, and as that pulls through, really lighten up the knee here. All of it, that any kind of highlight across here at the knee is going to look good. You don't have to try to emulate the one I have. I'm not going to try to emulate him perfect as well on the other one. I'm going to add a little more darker right back in here. Here we go. But I do like the roughness of it, because that's the light of the fabric and stuff there. I do like that. Let's just pull some of that medium value down a bit. Give some length to his leg here. Here we go. Up onto his knee. And a little bit darker here. Up into the front. Okay. Right up in here. There we go. Now we'll carry that down into the... Let this whole area right in here just kind of blur together here. And let the lines just kind of cross. It gets kind of blurry. That's the best way to handle that in there. Let's go burnt. Let's go right into our brown and some blue. Make that real dark. And we'll put this side of the saddle tree and stuff. I mean the edge of the front of the saddle horn and stuff here. Some of the shadows and stuff for the saddle right in there. Make just, these back here are just quick statements. Quick statements here. Blur those lines just a bit. You don't need to have a perfect outline hand. Blur the edges of it a bit. It's okay to do that. Here, we'll put a little bit of movement there. Maybe a light brown edge to the saddle blanket here, or light white and brown edge here to the saddle blanket. There, just an indication of it. See, you don't need much. A little bit of yellows into that, burnt siennas, yellows into some of that. Push some of that into this saddle. I really love burnt sienna into the saddles. That's really kind of close to the colors they are. There, like that. And again, I just, we're going to put a big rope and stuff on him up here in the front. So I just kind of emulate colors here. Here, like that. Make quick statement, quick stroke statements like the edge of this saddle. Boom, there it is there. It's all it really needs. And I don't need to, it's the viewer's eye is going to do all the detail work in there. As long as you don't do too much detail work there, that strap should cross that a bit. Here, put the girth strap in. His is dark. I always had a cotton one that I rode right after it came right down here and joined in with the buckle. I'm just going to put that, emulate that on. I've done it a few times, emulating it like that. I go ahead and do that. And just real quick statements here. Yellows, burnt siennas, a little whites. I love that Diarylide and that, and emulate the light edge of the saddle there. Put that up here into the idea of the saddle horn right up here. And sometimes I'll go more specific. Sometimes I just give a indication there of it and that, and let that just sit there. A little shadow, blue and burnt sienna. Just let that sit there. Let's put, I like that, streaky of the light. So we just streak down the light, right like that. Get that edge in there. See, we'll cover all this up with the rope, but see that pulling real quick with the brush real flat gives you some streaks and some other stuff, and you're just going to let all that movement do the defining for you. You don't, all that movement, the viewer will see what it is they need to see there then, right? And we'll go from there. Maybe a stroke of light down here, either side of that, his saddle pad there. Let's paint that a couple times. Let's restate what I just wiped out here. Yeah, blur those edges just a bit. And then I like to blur them there for a minute and then bring back a certain amount of the edge. Not all the way, just little bits of it. And then that brings it to, back better. Let's put in a little shadow. And we just call that's pretty much done. That's pretty good. Let's, so that's the small, and I like that. And normally you would have like a little blue, a little light, the little buckle right here. And I'll just emulate just a little line of it right there. Just, those of us that are horsey people will say it's, we'll understand where that is. You'll understand those buckles and stuff, where they go, where they are. And that's all we need. The rest of it is just all, let's just put that light edge in there. That's kind of neat. I like the lighter saddle blanket. And pull a couple marks across, just like that. That's pretty neat. So we built all that real nice. Let's build just a little more light yellow, burnt sienna, medium beige, the yellow oxide up here onto his hat. Just a couple of marks here. Careful. This mark right here, it playing up against that edge of that, that's really what's going to bring him forward. So I do want to give a nice edge here, okay? A nice edge. And see, that's what, it's like the last one we did, the Western packing out, where we that edge, like I said, against the mountain, we soften that mountain so that this edge of his hat will really bring this guy forward. You don't need to have perfect edges everywhere, otherwise, and if you do, they'll look really cartoonish. So you just pick out a few edges that you want to be very specific with. Sometimes, and you'll see me, I'll do these edges with the knife as opposed to the brush, so I get a nice little edge there. And but it's this edge that really will bring it forward. And since he's got a light cowboy hat on, this edge is really important there. You can see how that really brings him forward. So let's take some of our burnt sienna and blue. We'll tap right along his darker hairline there, just down his neck there. He has sideburns kind of in that photo there, so that will help us just emulate what is his head, his features. We're not going to go in there and paint ears. We're just going to let it sit there. And so let me darken that edge just a bit. And sometimes they could have just a touch more, maybe a bit of that darkness with some of the Diarylide, which gives this glow that we put on. Just a little more shadow right there. That looks pretty good. It's a little more dark over on this side, but we're going to lighten that just a touch. There may be a bit of that shadow back into that. Here. There, that's good. I love painting the hats, to me, the hats. Except this guy's, his hat's way back there, so we don't do that much to him. But the hat, you can see how that just really brings him forward. Now, let's take, and I want to go down here to my smaller. This is this is a number 4 flat, and I thought I put it out here. I had a smaller, that's my dinky one. Here's a little number 2 flat. We could use that one, but I had it out here. I guess I didn't. Little number 2 filbert here. I had it out earlier. Oh, here it is right here. All right. Little number 2 filbert is my favorite for doing facial features and stuff like that. So let's, let me just work a clean little area right here so we can, we'll just wipe this off just a bit. Little water. Wipe this off. Let's work our flesh tones right in here, because I like that blue. I like to add blue into my flesh tones too. So we have burnt sienna as our real shadow. Burnt sienna, a little light. Burnt sienna, a little more light. A little bit of yellow. Sometimes I like the flesh to glow a bit, so I'll use Diarylide Yellow. Okay, and this will be a light. Let's see how light. Now, he's mostly in shadow, so we don't have it super light, but it will dry down darker. Let's give a little touch there to his ear, like. Let's move over to the middle tone. We'll do that really across his chin, right into here. We'll leave some, and maybe a touch up this side of the face. We'll leave into that eye sockets and nose and stuff like that a little darker. Let's go a little darker. And just touch across. Now, a little bit more burnt sienna, and he'll get a little bit more of a glowy face. Now, with some of them, you know, when I do the little guy, when I do little faces like this, if you have room, you could put a light little, like a pinkish, not real pinkish, reddish Naphthol Red Light touch into the cheeks without making them too bright, but a little bit in there so that, you know, because the cheeks, the ears, the nose, the forehead and stuff all get a little bit of light, warm colors, the thin areas of the face, the warm colors. You hear portrait artists, we talk about that all the time. I'm going to straighten up his collar right there. Just pick up some blue, touch that in. Let's just pick up some more of that collar right there. And just maybe a bit more white. And see, I'll just leave this flesh tone in there because that's a good transitional kind of tone there. Right like that. That works pretty well. You know, you could, you know, stroke the collar a little bit more perfect because it is a forward element here. So you could do that just a little bit more perfect like that. Maybe a little bit more perfect right there. But like I say, if I'm correcting something, drawing something, I like to do it with the shadow, right? So shadow is really what I like to do it with. So I'll take a little shadow, a little burnt sienna, a little blue, a little bit of violet, and correct this with a bit of shadow there, pulling down. And that corrects that color just a bit. Maybe a mark of it down that edge there. A little bit of it coming out of that shadow there. That's pretty good. That works. Okay, I do like, I just noticed on him, he's got just a, well, that jacket is more straight. We won't do that. But we will put a little more shadow right in there. Just right in that. Now, okay, so into his face. Now we're just going to put down a line for the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and, you know, and get out of town. We don't want too much detail. So first I'm just going to take a little bit of that blue that was in my brush, with this flesh tone, it'll gray it just ever so slightly. And I'm going to use this in a few accent marks, small marks, there onto the face, right? And then I'll redefine that shadow a little darker, tiny bit of blue, maybe a tiny bit of violet in it. That's too much. This will cool it. This is what we're looking for, a little cooler gray. Maybe down this edge just a bit. Okay, that's good. And now we'll take some burnt sienna. We don't want the facial features. I'm just going to lighten that up with a bit of burnt sienna. You don't want the facial features to be like super dark, because then they'll look starey, right? We're going to emulate them. Even when you look at these guys that are here, you know, right up to here, this guy's a really good one to look at to see some of the detail. You know, you don't see that much detail there into those eye sockets and stuff. So we'll darken it down a little bit, a little burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, but we're not going to go and too dark here. So a little bit, just a bit of the emulation there, a little triangle or a little rectangle that I have there. And got a bit too much paint on my brush. And we'll look for a mark for the lower part of his nose and a mark for his mouth. Now, so I put that dark in there, right? And so many people will, and I do too, I did for the longest time, we start to correct with the dark. No, I put the dark in, and then I'm going to push it out of the way with some medium to light. So I'll go back and look. There's usually a lighter cheek right up here, so we'll push right up into that here. We'll push right up into this. And this usually, you have to do this a couple times. You know, I've never been satisfied with my characters the very first time I've done them. I've always had to come back and start working their features a little bit. So we're going to have to do it on this guy too, but that's okay. We can do that. A little bit of light onto the nose. This is an emulation here, right? So we'll push a little bit more dark right up here. You're not making eyes, you're making eye sockets. If that makes sense. So you're not making eyes, because this is a little guy. He's smaller than my thumb here. So you're not going to be able to get eyes. You're going to get eye sockets in there, right? And yeah, and many times, you know, you've heard me many a times here say I paint them for light and shade, and that's basically what I do. Is you're painting a character here for light and shade. So we'll put in the line for the mouth and the lower part of the nose, and then I come back with the light. So we'll go burnt sienna, a little yellow, a little glowy yellow this time. And let's just touch a little bit here onto the light side, maybe a touch there, a little touch down for his face on that side. But the big thing is you got a plane here for his cheek, and then this side of his face here. You got it. Oh, so dang small. I just took his eye out. Yeah. This takes a little bit here of going back and forth. So, and I will probably have to put on my magnifiers, which are somewhere around here. I have my magnifiers. I'll put those on and fix that up on him several times here. But that's okay. We'll get it. And each time I like to tap him a little bit, a little different color. That's too much, but figure that out. But this front cheek, we're going to paint for light and shadow. So this front cheek area right down in here, pulling down, that's a very important plane that sets the plane of his face. And as you add more light, the shadows that are here are going to look softer or look darker, and then you're going to have to add more shadow. Does that make sense? So you do it a few times, light and shadow. And let's just put a little bit of more burnt sienna into that as we go into that chin area there. That's coming good from what I can see. Yeah, just quick little statements of him there. This guy has nothing back there, but this little bit of light might be good back there on him. Just a touch. So I got the kind of the foundation of it in there. I'm going to do some more. I'll let that dry and I'll do some more. But let's just let's keep going here on him. We'll keep this going. I think looking at that now across that jacket, I want to add just a bit more light. They're really fun. Just sit back, you know, and they're really a lot. This is really a lot of fun to paint. I'm going to widen the width of this jacket just a bit right there. A little bit of that color coming out into there. There we go. Yeah, and I like that feeling across the width of his chest there. So if I do too many of those wrinkles, I lose that width of him across there. So I do like that width. Maybe emulate that light edge here just a bit more of that jacket. There, like that. Okay, so continuing on here, we'll build through. We're going to build through onto the horse like this. And build. And I'll probably do it one more time here. And how much you're going to do now is up to you. But I'll take some of my yellows. I do like the Diarylide Yellow, a tiny bit of the orange or the red Naphthol Red Light in there, which makes my really, really bright orange color for the nice highlights here on this Palomino here. So and I a lot of times I love to hold the brush like this and just drag it down because I get some brush movement differences and stuff into the color. I love that. See, it's hard for the camera to pick that up, but I really love the way that looks. And we'll drop that little bit right in there. And now you can see, I mean, I'm painting for textures, colors, movements. Here, we'll pull some of this down here a bit. There, like that. That looks nice. Let's grab some of that medium into the brush. We'll add a bit of light and do the same thing here again down the front of her blaze here. Down. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of blue to that, but she's small, so we can't do too much, you know, here. But a little bit of that light there, like that, right across the front. Sometimes little touches of that here. Give her more of a diamond shape here. There. Really a lot of fun here. Just pull it and pull it down and just let that color come off like that. Let's add a bit of that light right up above the eye. That's part of her socket there. Here on that one. And again over here. Yep, and then we'll add some of this dark here. Yeah, that looks good. And you may want to add a halftone. So let's add a bit of yellow right into a halftone and lighten some of that with a halftone right there. But see, that burnt sienna and that Diarylide is so pretty together. Here like that. Maybe a bit of that dark pulling right down there. Lets that light pull off of there. See, it gives just so much interest there. So I work that interest. So I'm going to work some of this shadow. And this is where I really love the open medium. So I'll take some open medium. We'll drop this light coming right down here again. And I can still see some of the undertone where I had taken some blue there. But let's take a little bit of brown and the beige and blue here. Right up here, maybe a little violet into that. Right into here. Model some of this together. See this old dirty gray? That's this beautiful color for this horse. And we'll just put a little bit of that bluish gray in there. Take some of that right in there. You know, the bluish kind of gray is beautiful into the shadows here. Shadow sides on her. Just looks great. Just slide up to a little bit of the warmer, lighter yellow here. Put on that heavier band right here on the side of her face. Here, maybe this other tiny lighter, this other heavy bone that sits right there. Just emulate that a bit. A little bit more burnt sienna into some of this gray, so it warms, changes colors a bit, and just add another mark or two right in there. There, like that. That's kind of pretty. Maybe a bit more burnt sienna and yellow into some of this gray. Just a little bit here, little tiny shadow down that side under her eye here and that side there. That's nice. A little bit here. I love to sketch with the darks. That gives me the greatest control, because the darks paint out everything so well. So it gives me great control over that. Let's add just a bit of the light that she'll have right back here. Underneath that eye just a bit. Break that eye. The lightness there. Is there any? Yep, little tiny. This is where I start looking now as I'm in my second and third time going through painting some of the horse here. I will start to look for small details, small marks that make the expression of the face. So there's going to be a little bit in the eye right here, a little down mark right there. Here that help make that expression there. And a little bit more of a rounded mark out into the eye right there. And yeah, a little bit more burnt sienna, a little blue. Here down into the front, here into the nostrils. Let's put that lighter gray, so a little more blue. Blue into the burnt sienna makes that gray. It's not a light gray, it's a little darker than that. Let's see. Blue burnt sienna. Let's try this. Puts that angle on the front of her nose there. Leave some of the other tone there. Don't take it all out. That worked great. And blue burnt sienna. This, I tell you, I love the little filberts for painting these details, because you can rise up on the point, and you know, with a little small round, which I used to use a lot, the small round would leave a ridge of paint to either side of the mark you met, and sometimes it was hard to get over that ridge. Well, I rolled the filbert over onto the chisel edge of the brush, or rise up onto it's not a perfect point, but I rise up onto it as much as I can, and that gives you a nice mark without leaving you huge ridges of paint. So here's the nostril here. Horse's nostril right there. I like that. A little bit of the shadow there. Right like that. That's neat. And just a little bit here. Down. Well, we're going to have that. We're going to have the reins and stuff going down there, but a little bit of the light, kind of lighter gray, right down here that just kind of sets the front of her nose and face there, and a bit of the darker gray underneath. So right where her lower jaw and upper meet, there'll be a little light line, and then the shadow of that. And that's probably a little bit wide right there on her, so I'll take some, let's add open medium to everything we do now. As we finish up on some of these layers, adding the open medium is going to give you some workability, some time to soften the mark, a little bit of transparency, See, I'll just thin into this a bit here. Thinner out just a bit. Yeah, and see, I mean, that's a real good point. Now, that edge is really sharp. I can leave it, or I can just wipe my brush and blur through it just a bit. Yeah, that's nice. Just enough right there. So let's come up. Let's take a look at her. So no, it doesn't have that deep, deep shadow in there. Let's take a little bit of yellow into this, and we'll take some of that deeper shadow out of there. She doesn't have that much in there. Some, but not that much. There. Because it's building up into her neck and stuff here now. And see, I love that. See, I like to add a lot of the open medium because not only does it stay wet that I can blur it, but it also gives it a little transparency. So I'm not destroying anything that I've done before by what I'm doing right now. I'm enhancing it. I'm not destroying it here. So now we'll take that mark there. I love that mark, that color mark. Let's push some of that right up here, up onto her ear, maybe a little bit more light here. Try not to make her ears quite so flattened out. That's when they're not happy. And they're not happy when their ears are flat. Quasar used to get really upset sometimes with me. Yeah. You want me to go back up there again? He did. Yeah. But I loved riding him for so many years. But and he was a rescue horse. When I worked at the sheriff's department, I worked a couple years in livestock and working for cattle rustlers and stuff. It was really a lot of fun. But I had impounded him because he was about 500 pounds underweight, skin and bones. And I impounded him, and no one ever came to claim him. And so I took him home and fed him up, and he became a magnificent horse. And my partner with the sheriff's department for years. He was a lot of fun. Years. But we'll put a little more light, a little more brush movement right in there. I love to have that brush movement in there. Especially, now we're into the center of interest in the front of this stuff. We want to have some of this brush movements and stuff that just give that interest, right? Let's take out this white. It's a little bit too much of a white edge right here, so we'll put a descending line down, which will help her decide that side of the face. And then we'll soften this, and this is stuff I look for. So that line on her face right there might be a little bit too much, so I'll put a little bit more of the light leaving that area there. And yeah, and so you can build more of a star. I think I will build more of a star on her right up here. Right up about like that. There. That's kind of pretty. And while we have that open medium right into some of this stuff, let's hit the highlights here of a couple of light strokes. Here coming down. Here, I'm going to take a bit of that light right up there. Again, once I start to make these real lights, almost white, not white, but almost white, I like to travel the colors here. Here. I like to travel the colors, so I'll touch into a few other areas. So we'll pull down, we'll start here, pull down, lift off, just the point of that filbert there, and lift off. Here, a little bit here, there. Let's put a heavier dose, some more white. Let's just pull this down, light, here, and see, get that fractured edge there. That's kind of pretty. There we go. That works better. Sometimes you let your paint. Now, see, when I started this morning, I came out and I put my paints out 2 hours early. So they start to tighten up a little bit. That's how I like to paint them, a little bit tighter. And So I did that. When I start my final painting, I don't like my paints to be loose. I like them to be very, really kind of tightened up, thick, almost tacky. And that gives me just nice little touches and stuff that I can do and stuff. So that's what I like. Just little bits of drawing here. Tiny little marks, more lights here. Let's put a little yellow with that, a little bit of that. See, the Diarylide's a little sticky on the top, see? I like that. I'll just poke it a bit, grab some of that texture and stuff. And just hit, I call these the little sparks, the little light sparks and around. I like that. And here, there we go, like that. A little bit into the shadow there. There we go. Not quite so straight. Back and forth across those edges a few times. Get that softer look. There we go. Okay, so I like that. Now, I rinsed my brush by mistake. Didn't mean to do that. I'm going to take some yellow oxide. Let's go right up here towards this. Brown it up a bit. Some of that Diarylide Yellow. I'm loving this Diarylide Yellow on this particular Palomino. Usually I use like burnt siennas and greens and stuff, but I'm really liking this Diarylide this time on her with this color setup. Of course, we have a lot of browns this time, so that may be one of the reasons that's affecting it. More browns on this one. Let's put that nice light struck here. Right out here. Let's travel that right up here again. A little bit more light right up there. Like that. Travel that a little bit through the painting. There. Just a bit here. Here we go. Some of this real light and yellow here. Let's add a few touches, nice warm touches right in there. And around, she can have, now we can brown it up a little bit more down here as we stroke some of that light, like up onto her leg here. And as I paint the, I love this this smaller brush here for all of this detail, right, which I like. And I think I'm going to add, I see the tiniest little bit of a plane of a shadow right here dropping down like that. So I think there should be one, yep, one on the other side. And that's the thing is, the question is, can you get all of those planes in before you're done noticing all of this stuff? Let's push this back here. Right back up there. I love that. I love the fractured edge, so it's not smooth. That looks good on her. Okay, so that little bit of light right here gives him a little belly. Maybe we pull. See, this is still wet because I added open medium, so it's still wet. So I need to smooth that out just a bit. He has a little belly. There. Okay, so when I come back into the bigger ones now, let me go back to like my number 8. An 8 or a 10. I usually like the 10, but we'll try this 8. A little a little medium beige, a little yellow. Before I'd added some green, which I like as well, sometimes a little burnt sienna. This is a little grayed side here. We have different than what we did before. We did some of those glowy colors. We could add a little more glow to that. A little bit of this grayed color right there. And some open medium so I get just a bit of transparency. And that's what I like. See, now you're coming back. Now we're going to build. We'll build this front big muscle right here. They're big shoulder muscles here. Big flat areas of that muscle. That's right there. Let's build up a little more light. Even though this is shadow, we'll build up a little bit more light right up in here. pulling down this side here. That gives that big flat plane right there that they have. There like that. Okay. And beige, burnt sienna, and this is for maybe a little bit of the green, the burnt sienna and the greens. Beautiful. I use this on sometimes a little bit of this yellow, Diarylide Yellow. I use this on elk and all kinds of stuff. I love this kind of cooler, it's greenish brown tone. I just love that there. And let's darken that. A little more burnt sienna, a little bit of green here. Okay. Right down here. A little bit darker. Beautiful tone. And you can, and now what I'm looking at, so some open medium in this, and what I'm looking at also is the structure. I take with my shadow, basically I call them anatomy strokes. You've seen me do this many times. And if I need to make the shadow deeper, so the green burnt sienna is beautiful. Sometimes make it glow with a little bit of the Diarylide Yellow. And then if I need to make it darker, I'll add a little blue, a little violet to it. We'll make the darker coat. If it's too green, add some more violet and burnt sienna. That's beautiful, deep, rich tone right there. And we'll use that like right deep into this big front shoulder muscle. Just kind of draw that in there. Right, she has that one, that shadow, the leg shadow is right back in here. That shadow is right in there. And yeah, we'll drop this right up like that. That's good. Right there. And a little deeper shadow right here on this leg, right there. We'll push some of that right back in there. Here. That's good. Let's get some of that deep shadow right here on her belly between this leg and that. There. Oh, I love that. And carry that deep shadow, nice deep shadow, like right up in here. A little bit, a few marks of it. Here we go. And then you can soften it. Let's go back yellows. Some of these lights. Just model this together right in here. And these are the colors. These are all, this is what we call the broken color. So what I do is I'm playing through the yellows, the burnt siennas, the greens, the blues, the violets. And just using all different kinds of those tones in here. And setting this up. Now, so sometimes I'll come in here and, well, you'll see me here in a minute. I'll just use even some blues just right in there. That's what, you know, a lot of Western painters do. Let's get that open medium in that. I can feel when I don't have enough open medium. It's not slippery enough. So here, this was putting on the light tone. I then drop down into here, a half tone, slightly different color, but it's also what we call broken color. So I can slide into a little more green or brown or the beige there, and maybe a bit more of the yellow or something. Maybe I'll make that ridge of that muscle right there. Here. So in other words, I'm starting to paint the anatomy of the shadows and everything there. Right? And getting that open medium in here. You get a bit of that transparency in there. Let's just drop a bit of this mark. Feeling coming out that way. And this muscle of the leg pulls up like that. That's good. But I love that it's a little bit transparent, so you get these beautiful tones in there. See? That's what I like. There. Let's drop this lighter mark right in here, down for that leg, down that side, and some of that light pulling down this way, right like that. Some of the, maybe a burnt sienna and yellow, and burnt sienna, yellow oxide, a little green, a little violet, slightly shadowed here. Drop that right in there. See how it's a little deeper and a little bit more shadow. That's a beautiful, slightly different shadow color, a little bit green. So I'll add a bit of that around. into some of these areas. So if I get a tone that I really like, I'll carry it. I'll move it through the horse. See? And around we go. There we go. Let's move some of that real light and yellow right back here. Let's just hit that nice light right back up there. Follow through and down. Restate some of that up here. Remember, move those colors, right? Restate them, move them. There we go. Just like that. So now you can see the painting of the horse is really a tremendous amount of fun. A little burnt sienna, medium beige and maybe a little greenish right here. That's a little thin right there, so let's thicken up that color a bit right there. Maybe and change the color a bit. You know, towards the end of the painting, even if I forget to show you, sometimes I forget to show you. I'll get to the end of the painting and I was like, oops, I forgot to show you guys this, or I run out of time. But I'll put the blue. You've seen me do that. I'll take the blue of his jacket. Matter of fact, maybe we'll do that before we even get over here so that you can see that I'm going to do it. But I'll grab a bit of these shadows here. And let's work that burnt sienna, a little violet, a little blue. That's some of my real deep shadows here. Not always exactly the same color, guys. Change it up, the tone a bit. But if you make the tone, use the tone, right? Use it someplace else, right? We use it. I don't know if you can hear my dogs snoring back there. They're getting good snoring here. Let's round that muscle off there. There we go. That looks pretty good. That's a little bit straight right there. So, and in the reference, it's arched a bit more. So let's do that. But then I'll add a couple of strokes of the blue so you get the idea here, just in case I forget. So what I do is take out here, we got this beautiful blue violet in the sky, blue green and stuff here. So I'll take some of that over here. And it's I use this into the shadows here. So, and it's such a great technique. I first started noticing this years and years ago when I started watching one of the Western painters, Jason Rich, and I really liked it. And I noticed Bill Anton and a lot of the other Western painters do this. And so I was like, oh, those are beautiful accents. And so I just add a little bit of that accent. See, it's a coolness to it that just causes the rest of the colors to just pop here. And I love it. I've always loved how Jason Rich paints his horses, and Bill Anton, and they're just masters of it. So I just love how they paint them. And so you add those cool little touches there, see? And sometimes, you add these early, like now, and it's like, wow, that just really does so much. Let's add a cool touch right down in here and down into there and, right into there. Cool little touch, maybe right down in there. And, you don't want to make it a blue horse, but you add this cool little touches, through the painting. And it just does a lot, just does a lot. So, yeah, I think that glazed down just a little bit too much right there. And, there's going to be areas that I'm going to come back and I'm going to slightly work on and fix. Maybe a bit more light, back up into some of them. But I'll do that. Just bring some of that back up without bringing up too much edges. Sometimes I do this, if I'm working on something and I'll catch it and see it, I'll do it while I see it because I won't always remember to do it. So sometimes it seems a little bit disjointed as I'm working through some of the areas, but if I see it, I got to go get it, right? So that looks pretty good. That works pretty good. I do like on that, now that I really see that, it's got this fold of blue that actually comes down this way and up his leg a bit, and I like that. So we'll just do that. Maybe a little bit of that light we just put on the horse here. There, right on his knee. There, like that. So you can even see to the photo there, I need a little more light into that blue. And so, you know, you have to come back sometimes, several times to get that light, like the way you like it there. You know, we might have to hit that a couple times to get that in there. But that's okay. That's why we love to paint, right? That's why we love to paint. And, yeah, that's nice. We'll just, let's shadow that back a bit and then quit playing with that. And then we'll move on to this front cow here. We'll move on to the front cow. So I went a little over time here and on doing this, but I think maybe, oh, and I got to go up and work on his face too. But I think you enjoy, you know, seeing some of that, especially on that horse. See how pretty she is now. And let's put a bit of that deeper shadow right in there. And but on this particular camera, this one that you're looking at, everything, it's almost out. So we're going to have to go change up. I'll change that. I'll take a break for just a minute and change up, grab some more disc to film to, and there we go. That's kind of neat, but I like that angle that way. There we go. Yeah. And so I'll go change that up, go have a quick cup of coffee or something. Then we'll come back, we'll paint the front cow here. We'll start adding some of the grasses and yeah, and then start evaluating it, how much more. So we have some details. You know, we have the stirrups and all of the, you know, like some people say, the steering wheel, the reins onto the horse and stuff. So, you know, we'll add those in. But I've only got just like a few minutes left there on that. So I got to go change that. So we'll be right back. Oh, well, I have this blue. See, even up over here. So just a little touch. Just a little touch of that. See how pretty that is? And it just helps break some of those areas there. Let's put a little bit of blue just right up there into that hat. Quick little stroke, quick little mark. Just breaks that up. Kind of nice here. Yes, so I'll do that. I'll change that out. We'll come back, and for you at the magic of filming, it'll be 2 seconds. I'll be back, and then we'll come back and finish up some more details and stuff on there. That's too much. Oh, but it's got to be a little bit more over there, because what do you have that I haven't added on that? I added it down over here on this one, the cast shadow. So we got to worry about those cast shadows. I added a little dark right in there to add those, but this will have a cast shadow there from him on that side, because the light is up on that side. So I'll do that here. We'll just pull that back here like that. Yep, and we'll come back with that, okay? All right, see you in just a second. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so had a little lunch and some coffee and stuff, and I just put a few more little shadows in on there, and I think I'm going to leave him just that kind of simplistic. I was working, and I ended up adding a little bit of red to some of this flesh to warm it up a bit. But let me just come down the side, sometimes in the side here, and still have a little bit of a shadow there, but join that into the neck there just a bit. So, and then touch that color into his hands here, and his one hand there. Now, I think I need to add a bit more of the, some highlights back up there. That's all dry. It's been a little over an hour because I had some lunch, and so I think I need to come back with just a tiny bit. Now, you could See, if you'd given the whole thing a coat of sealer or something like that, you could just take a little water and take it back off. But I love to come back and just touch little lights, you know, into some of those areas that you see. You know, so it's like push it back and bring some forward again. You get such great interest and stuff to your paintings when you do things like that. You know, so I had a little touches of some of the blue. But like on the photo there, you see that real light, that shoulder and the front head of the horse on this side, which isn't too bad. I already have that kind of lightened up. A little bit of light blue there. But just little touches, see? Doesn't take too much. And all of a sudden he comes forward just a bit more and with a bit more interest. So those are the kinds of things that I like to do, you know. And let's lighten up just a bit right in here onto his knee a bit more. Right there, that looks pretty good. I added a bit of the shadow there. One of the things that, you know, I step away from it, and it's good to step away every once in a while. I step away from it, and I looked at a lot of my marks were running the same way, so I want to vary some of them just a bit, and I like that. And yeah, so, and you know, make sure you get some of those wrinkles and stuff like that in there. You know, not too many, but just some, and that looks pretty good there. Now, we have to put in our ground, and you've seen me do that 1,000 times in all the westerns and all this stuff. I'm going to do the same thing, but I want to go over with you this this cow up here again. So as I'm adding the next layer in here, I'll do a little bit of softening, some of the softening, but I love the undertones that we have here. So what I did basically on this one is build him up again, and I really want to build this one up quite a bit, and some textures and some stuff going on. That will allow me to paint these just a bit more here as well, and then do all of our grasses. But so I paint with a lot of open medium now in all of my stuff. So I'm going to start out like I did before with shadows, shadow tones here, and some of my darks and some violets, some extender. Keep those darks really toned here, and I'll use this like right up through here. Now this will really pop this part of this cow forward, get that nice rich color there, and then you have to decide, is that too much? Is it taking away too much from your horse? I mean, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make as the artist in some of this now, but we want to make sure we get rid of some of these holidays. And so into the shadows, though, I'll be a little more transparent. Grab some of I like the brush movements. So I'm going to come right in here, and I follow what I try to do, like I did last time, is I try to follow the basically the anatomy of this. So this is that big shoulder area right here. And I want to get some of that and a little bit of extender, the blues, sometimes a little bit of that red in there or violets. You know, get that real dark right in there, that nice. And he really comes forward when you do that. Really a lot of fun. So get some of that. Let's put a mark or two right back here, right up against the edge of this cow. So you might, you know, and it's like I always say, you might end up coming back and changing a lot of things because of simultaneous contrast. You add one color or something onto something, and it changes the expression of the rest of those colors. So, you know, but we're aware of that. We know that, and we'll look for that. Let's drop this in, get this nice contrast here. Look at how that just causes him to come to life. Those second and even into your third or fourth, sometimes in your front areas, really putting those tones in there, you know, really do good stuff here. So we'll grab some of that. Now more, let's go, I'm just going to use it right into what I was doing there. Grab some of my yellows right into my burnt siennas here. Love those. All of these tones here. Open medium now goes into your medium to light tones here. And I really chunk them on here. Now, some people may want to blend them out a little bit more. I like them to get pretty chunky so that they really hold a lot of interest. So I'll put on a lot of textures and stuff with them. And sometimes with these, what I end up doing is just grabbing some of this and just grabbing like this and putting on a real heavy mark of it. Let's just do that right in there like that, right? And then sometimes I'll use like my medium color like this with the knife. See, watch, it'll take this out. See, boom, just like that. See, that's a great look. It's a different look than a brush. So we just run them together there for a few minutes and make some of the, anatomical marks that you would have there. And it just does a really great job. But you can always come back with your brush and define and straighten up like a little shadow coming out this way. Let's get a little more burnt sienna in that here. And leave some of that leaf. But I love the crossing of some of those marks. See, it just adds so much. So if you love that, that's how I like to do it. If you don't, just blend it down a little bit more. That's all you got to do. But I'll put in a little thick mark right in here. That'll really bring this head forward right there. See? And then let's get a little bit thick right back here on his rump, right back forward here. Right in there. That's good. Let's get those lights right in here. Right up here. I love how Bill Antone and stuff, Anton, it really paints his cows and stuff. Just so, you can tell he's been around them a long time, but just so casual and so free with them. And sometimes I'm still a little stiff, but I love it. I love painting them. And getting some of those movements. Get some of that orange up here. A little bit of light into some of that orange. Open medium. Lots of open medium in here. Some of those real light oranges. And open medium. And see, I'm really a lot of paint. Really a lot of paint here. And because that paint just really comes forward. Now, on this one, I did a lot of the knife work in it. So, and you can do that if you want. Here, I'm going to add that light touch right in there. Some of that light hitting right up in there. I like that. Here, some of that shadow right back in here. And so you see I do a lot of digging, applying. Sometimes I'll go like this, which just gives you some heavy, heavy textures in there. And then just turn around and lay some, the burnt sienna right there next to it. I just love that. And again, grab your knife. And I showed you that before. Grab your knife and lay some of that in. And see the draggy marks that you can get. And then you can correct it. And I'm using a lot of paint, people. You can correct it with just brush lifting off and pushing here. Let's go little red in this right in here. Build this lighter shoulder right in there. And some thicker paint. And even with the acrylic, when you paint this thick and you don't add open medium, it's going to take 20-30 minutes to dry because there's so much paint on there. So it's going to take a while. Here we go. Get that hip and into this right in here. Pull some of that and use this to start making some of your anatomical marks to get some of the And I'm down a little bit more in the highlights than what that one is, but I'm liking this cow. I'm liking the way he's coming out here. So just get a little bit more here. And let's get some burnt sienna, some open medium, mix that in, and just come up through here. Take some of that out and get that intermediate tone of burnt sienna. And boy, can you imagine this? I mean, this is going to be great when we round this up a bit here, coming into his, down into his body there. Love that. And yeah, just that's, but real thick here. This is what really gives it its interest. I have a lot of paint on the surface, and that's what I want. Lots of paint, lots of color movement, and sometimes those just really nice, boom, there's an orange, you know, and the orange is the nice sunstruck area, kind of hitting right into there. And see, then you can do all this, you know, once you got all this color on there, smear it all up and pull some of it up like that and get some more natural movements to it. Here, like this, taking the shadow and pulling up like that, wiping my thumb here, pull up like that, and get a beautiful natural more natural movement to that light. But yeah, just all kinds of stuff that you can do because your color's so thick. You got lots of time to do this. Let's add a little shadow, moving a little bit of red violet into that, and get a little shadow in there. There, like that. Love that. Ooh, that. There we go. Some of that. Now, I may want thicker yet. Let's get some yellows. Here, that looks pretty good. This is a nice, let's get some of that burnt sienna in this, right? Maybe a little bit more of the orange into that. So some Naphthol Red Light, some of this, some open medium, some really thick. See how thick this is, right? And you take this with this and you just drop down some of those marks that you get. Now I left those all in there, and this is really, really wet, and when I did this one here is a little more dry, so you get that granulation slightly right there that you see. And so that's up to, if you want more granulation, in other words, more movement interest and stuff like that into the cow, then let your paints dry up just a bit. So I'll just pull this down, following his anatomy of this nice barrel that right there. That looks pretty good. And some of this shadow, like you see up there on that, on the sample. There, pull that up. I like that. Maybe a little more light right up here. Hits right up in there. Sometimes I like to just pull back. It puts us a little bit of that underlying shadow as a nice little form. So that's pretty nice. And you can, if it's too much in here, you can break it up with just a few marks of the burnt sienna, so it's not quite, you know, not too heavy in one particular color there, like that. I like that. Let's continue on though. Here we'll go back to our 8 or a 10 here. Now, and the sample, this one over here has a lot of shadow orange and stuff in it. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go over here right into my blues and this into my shadow color, and I'm going to paint with a lot of open medium. So we'll paint a lot of open medium here. Tap some of that down, right? And we'll touch into some more light, maybe even up over here, right? We'll hit that light right there. That light part, imagine, and then some of it softer right out here. Some of it lift right up into what we just did. So you get some of that softness and that, you know, the soft color exchange through here. And we'll take a bit of the shadow, these two. Shadows, use extender, right? Thin it out here. Let's pull some of this shadow right down here, because you got to imagine the cast shadow, because I'm changing the light source just a little bit. So you got to imagine the cast shadow, more burnt sienna, a little dark, a little red, violet here. Some of that cast shadow there. Right like that. Right, a little darker here. Here we go. A bit of the light in the gray here. Some of that blue here. I like to take and, you know, back paint down some of like the burnt sienna here down to create some of the, you know, a transitional color for that, some of that light. But it could be a little thicker here, a little thicker, a little darker right in here. There we go. And let's put a little bit more shadow right down in here. You can see how easy this paint. See, it blends in so easy, especially when you start using a lot of paint like I'm doing here. I mean, really painting it. A lot of paint and a lot of open medium, extender medium. This will be wet. This will probably, because it's getting a little bit later afternoon now, this will probably stay wet until through tomorrow morning. So you have a lot of time when you're painting like this. Now, let's put a little bit more of that burnt sienna right there. Took out part of his horn there like that. And there we go. So there we go. Bring a little bit of that so you can use the knife or you could use your brush like this. Just get some of those beautiful textures and calligraphy, the brush mark calligraphy that gives so much to it. Let's thicken this shadow up a bit. Little red violet. That's a pretty shadow. And work that up. See, that's a nice rich color with the cool hitting then into this warm. Nice transition there. That's nice. Let's put some of that right in here. Don't want to put too much right out over here because we put that background on there to push it back a bit. There. We have the gray part of his leg right here. And this one. Maybe just a touch of that dark there. go. Touch of that dark right up here. Some of it onto this one. All do, you know, Herefords get all kinds of markings on them. They have some basic markings, but boy, they get a lot of different markings too. Right down to these hooves that are going to be here. Mark for his hooves. Let's gray that back a bit. Here we go. Just like that. That looks pretty good. I think I'll push this back just a bit. Get this softer. Right up here. This is, you know, the transition. This was a nice transition area. So I kind of lift and just blur it out a little bit. Lift and just let it run into that other color. It gives you a nice little transition there. But it's good also to make sure that you're following the plane. So this is a big shoulder here. So we've got to pull some down in that plane here. So we'll pull down. You see a lot of paint. See how well that paints together with all of that paint. And so when you're doing something like this, sometimes it's a little hard to use that so much paint. You go, oh, wow, especially if it comes for acrylics, you know, we tend to paint a little bit thinner. And I'm not. I'm painting with a tremendous amount of paint here onto this, especially onto this front cow. And you can see how he is coming forward here, see? He's coming forward, and that's what we want. So, here we go. Just like that. A little bit here. And see, I can just wipe my brush, put it back in, because see, I pick up white. So I wipe my brush, sometimes tap into it again so I don't drag white too high up. And just lift and stop that right there. That's pretty neat. Nice little light here. Here we go. Yes, and some light right up here on his face. That's pretty neat. Now you can let this tack up a little bit and then come back in and add a few more little burnt sienna, maybe burnt sienna and a little bit of blue shadows here. Let me put out some more burnt sienna here. Whoops, clogged up a bit. Pull that out and put out some more burnt sienna here. And make sure we get that anatomy of this, like this back hip here, correct? A little bit more. There, that's good. Maybe that touch of that light and burnt sienna down this hip side there, like that. That's good. Yeah, maybe a little more. Just pick up a lot of burnt sienna now. Just right in there for that mid-tone. Right in there. See, I just pick up this, I've got so much paint, I could just pick up a dollop of it here and just use that up in some of that. I see, it's just building the paint and building the paint. It just is so much fun. Now, thinner a little bit here. Let's get some of these, restate some of these shadows here. Just a little bit thinner. And then we'll come back and build back up some of those lights. So now we'll come right back up over some open medium, back into our lights. Build those up here. a heavy texture. Boy, that's a lot of paint. And there we go. Just drag some of that around, following the contours, right? Yeah. Little shadow. Little bit of light on the tip of this eye socket. There. Some of this curving right around here. Yep. It's like that build up. See, I've got some texture showing up in this paint, which is awesome. Awesome fun. A little bit of this right around on this horn. Over onto this one. I love painting with that and this speed. See the speed I'm going? I know it's a bit fast, but I love this speed because this keeps me casual. And, you know, where I'm just working it real casual. You'll see me do this on florals as well. And sometimes, you know, for you younger painters, that's hard. But that's a goal that you want to work for is speed, because speed keeps your brush casual. And so it's very important. So we'll push a little light there. And maybe a bit of our blues and violets. We got to get some of those in here as well. Here. And we gray it with some burnt sienna here. There. A little bit lighter. Here. A little bit of that dark. I love just, see the colors just go back and forth and I'm controlling. So if I want this white to sit up on that shadow, I just make sure my white is a little bit thicker. That's all I'm doing, is I'm painting mostly all of this with consistencies. So I know if I want something, you know, thick sticks to thin. That's the rule. That was the rule all the way back when I was an oil artist. And that's the rule, and that's the rule we use, thick sticks to thin. And so, you know, we would really thicken up the paint as we get going further and further into our painting. Let's put that, matter of fact, let's go to a smaller brush here. And go, we rinsed that just a bit. I left some of that color dry in there a minute. Go thicker here and put that slope right into his nose here. A little bit better. Nice thick paint. There we go. Some really a lot of fun. Get some of those contours and angles of him here. Painting into light, you know, so I push my brush so I don't have any paint in it, and then painting back into some of these shadows, you get that halftone look there, which is kind of nice. Go. That's pretty neat. I like that. Now on the other cow there, he has a lot of orange in here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to, that's a lot of glowy kind of color, but he's way up front here, and so I want to keep the light moving through, and then we'll put the shadow in over there. But yeah, that's pretty neat. This guy's a little more furry than this one. And what I did on this guy was I just took a little bit of and just went like this. Now I might do that. That just makes him a little bit more hairy looking, and stuff. So I might do that towards the end of the painting here too, after we do some of the grasses here. But yeah, that works pretty nice. A little bit right there. That's pretty nice. Okay. Now, okay, so detail work. Let's get into some of this detail work before we go, and then I've got a lot of grasses and stuff to put on. But, you know, we have a dark boot here, and we're just going to paint it very simple here. And this one comes out like this. Just like that. And you see a bit of the brown and stuff of the boot here. And the edge of his jeans there. And I'm going to keep everything move kind of quick and keep everything simple here. So there. A little bit of that brown. The edge of that boot, and then we'll do the stirrups. If you want that kind of wooden stirrups, you know, I use more of the brown and the burnt sienna to kind of give a wooden look to it. If you want the metal ones, that's a little bit different, but so we'll metals, blues, and the metals, blues and whites and stuff with it, and you create that silvery kind of color. Let's grab a little bit more color, even a little more burnt sienna, a touch of yellow. Just now once I draw it on, then I'll come back and add some light and dark touches a little bit here and there to it. And simple. Very, very simple here. Just the point of the boot. Let's see, that comes out. Point of the boot comes out. Across that. There we go. And let's give that a nice shot of the flat of this stirrup. Boom. Right like that. Maybe a little light. I don't generally, you know, in these get too much detail in it. I just keep them kind of simple. There we go. And you can just give the idea over here, just like that. That's all that needs. And then we're going to put in a lot of ideas, the reins and stuff like that. So I'm going to go to my smaller little, I love the small filbert for doing this kind of stuff. Burnt sienna and into my brown, my blues and stuff, and violets right in here. A nice dark brown color. We'll put in the curb bit that he has here. The idea of it. Here out to this side as well. And up across, you should have a band goes up there, down the sides of the face, down here, maybe see a little bit of it right in here. There. You can put any kind of yellows or little bits of highlight. Sometimes, though, I just leave these very simple here. And that because they don't need anything, really. They really don't. Let's go hit this hand because I did put this, we could, you know, I brought his hand up holding it. I should probably maybe do something like that right over here. Might be kind of nice. Right up, if that's the horn right there. Put up a little bit of the flesh tone in there. We'll alter it a bit. And the idea of that there, maybe crossing over or so, or maybe it's coming down to this side. Maybe we don't do that. Maybe we just leave it like that. We keep this simple. Sometimes the simplest statements are the best. There we go. Nice little curved bit. Extra little bit of the reins coming down the sides here, like that. Extra. My saddles have all these little leather straps everywhere that we use to, you know, tie on things like your saddlebags and stuff like that. So little stuff, little movement stuff. Let's add a little bit of shadow here we're going to put a rope hanging right in there. And all of that we did for that horn and stuff just doesn't show, but maybe we'll put just a little light right up here so you see the horn. That would be good. And, you know, these are the kinds of statements that, you know, are hard for the artist, but I love these quick statements like this because they're free, they're natural, and they're scary as all get out when you're first starting. I mean, I can't tell you, the first time I was going to do a lasso line, a little medium beige and a little light here. The first time I was going to do this, I was scared to death. And I start out small, and I just add a few lines like this and swirl it around. And if you get something too big, let me show you something. If you get something too big there, just take your brush with a little water and you'll take it right out, okay? Now, you know, the tendency, I like to use a little filbert like this so that the lines actually kind of, you know, they're not perfect lines. They're blurry lines. You know, it's just kind of blurry. And I might come up here like this and put in a little bit more of a perfect little knot or something on it. Or maybe here on the edge, out to the outer edge, I will do a couple of final ones that are a little bit more, we say perfect. You know, this right in there like that. But most of the time I just let it go. And you can paint back if you get too much, like I got just a touch maybe, into something there. Just take some of your blue and stuff from his leg and paint some of that back out. And then just touch it back in again. Really nothing to them. Just like that. Yep. And a little shadow. There, yeah. Sometimes, you know, just putting in a blurry line is all you need, but here we go, just like that. And let's just put in a little highlight touch here. Follow it around. There we go. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. But let's paint some of that out. So little touches. Just take some of the background. So, you know, like if you make a mistake with it, and I've done it several times, I'll paint some of this out. Just a little bit. Just paint it out. Back and forth. Matter of fact, let's let me show you here. We'll make this a little smaller. So we'll blur it back out here. Let's make that a little smaller. Sometimes, you know, like the fusion is really soft, so it will blur out your lines a little bit, which is what I really like that. But if you want more of that actual rope look to it, then and we need to point up the lines just a little bit more. And I did like this, and I don't want to lose that, so I think I'm going to push that leg. I like that leg coming down there, so maybe let's redo this. Not completely redo it, but push some of that lightness. I like that on there. But see, all of, now this is the thing. See, I'm going to correct this in here. Well, I'm going to change it. When I go to change it, I don't paint out everything that I did, because see, that's just good blurriness in there. Does that make sense? And when I was a younger artist, I go, and I worry about painting it all out. No, I don't do that. See, I'll tap. All this is just really good movement of color and light, and I don't need to redo everything there. I'm going to lighten up that lower leg again. We're going to reshoot this on here. But don't paint it all out. Leave some of this blurriness. That's my point. Leave some of this blurriness that we had here. Leave it, because that's all really good stuff. Let's put the edge here, since we're doing this down here like this. Let's put the edge of his leg here, of that, his jeans and stuff there, catching up to that side of that stirrup. And this stirrup, a little blue, a little dark, would come down from the horse right here and join in right there. Boom, like that. So we'll put a little light edge. We'll be a little bit more correct here. Like that. That joins in, right? And maybe some of that dark brown right down in here. There we go. You don't need to be, I don't need to have this perfect, right? There we go. Now, let's go back up here with our brown and our white. A little less white. Let's go just a touch more to the brown here. And we'll just circle around like that. Here we go. Yeah, I like that. Now, that's better. We're going to keep it smaller. I got a little big, so let's keep it smaller. Walk it out about like that. Maybe so. And here we go. Just the idea of that. Let's see, it's just a wispy little idea of it. Couple of little lines across. There, like that. Let's put a couple of little lines. Almost like a little highlight right up here. And this will be softer and better. Here we go. Some line right there on the top of it there. That's a little bit of a hole right there. So I'm going to bring one up a little higher, right up in there. Kind of filled the hole a little bit. There we go. Just like that. If you've ever had the lasso rope, boy, they're stiff, and so they kind of go everywhere. They're gangly. They really go everywhere. Oh, so that looks pretty good there. Let's take a little bit of blue. So you can see how you can do that. You play back and forth with those. It's really not hard. And I love, and look at the blurriness that I put in there. And I could come back in, matter of fact, let's do that. We could come back in, take a little bit of our blue and white, that lighter color here. There's something really light here. And hit that highlight right there on his leg one more time. Push that in. Maybe a little bit right up there. See? Yeah, matter of fact, maybe we'll put it into the stirrup and put just a touch of that blue right down there on the edge so we get his boot right in there. And again, simple lines. And sometimes these simple lines, I like to show you guys things. Sometimes these simple lines like this, like the edge of that stirrup or something like that, I'll put in with my knife because that gives a, you know, it's a different fractured look. See, watch with this. See that little fractured look there? And I like that. Here, let's take this edge, a little texture on the knife. Just draw that in, see? It's a little textured edge there. And it gives it a bit of difference, right? So, all kinds of stuff. But let's just bring this back up right down there like that. And just add some of the movement in there. Sometimes when, you know, I'll hide stuff in movement because, you know, on a saddle there's just all kinds of stuff. But you can just, you know, just take some movement lines here. Sometimes a little shadow there, like that. Little shadow here under the horn. Sometimes I do that. There, like that. I think I'll put just a couple more little lights right in here. Right like that. That just to round that up a bit. It's a little too even, but why did I do that too even? There we go. Just like that. That looks pretty nice. But let's take this silvery gray kind of thing and we'll put a line here for the shiny part of the curb bit. Little dots. Sometimes little, if you see them, little edges there for the conches or little buckle, the little buckles or decoration on some stuff. Let's bring this rain right back up on top of that now. There we go. That looks pretty good. I like to, but there's a few things like, you know, I'll go through, especially I'll notice them tomorrow morning or so. You know, edges or little points that, you know, I go through and I'll add a few extra little things. We want to, so we have a little bit here and we have some of the grasses and stuff to add to it. And then I'll finish all of that up and I'll show you guys the final here too. But I want to do some of this blue, some of this softer blue. Let's put a little extender in it so this blue is very soft. Here. This blue is just so nice. Here. Especially with, you know, the cows and stuff here. It's just, I want to deepen that shadow there on that side. Now the grasses, when we go to do these grasses, I've done these with you so many times, guys, so I don't think you need to see a lot of it because I show them all over on all the other videos and stuff. But I'll show you a little bit of it, how I'm going to build it all up, and then that's up to you, you know, how much you want to do. So a little bit of those horns there. Needs a little bit wider on this right up here. There we go. A little bit of that blue in there too is nice. There. But let's get some of this blue again here. Yeah, just, like this would be his shoulder, which would be a good point to bring out that shoulder line right there. Right in here, back here. Some of those blues. Yeah. That looks good. Pull this line down just a bit more. And he's got climbs up there just a little bit right here, so I'll flatten that out just a bit. There we go. That's better. And maybe a bit more light right there, but that blue really, boy, that blue really works nice. Now that I lit up that other one right there, we'll light him up a bit too. There. Yeah, some of that blue, just real light. Some of this, I'm going to go back and touch these again. But that sets that pretty darn nice. That works pretty nice. I want to set, let's go browns right up into here. Some whites. Set that big, this is just such a big top knot on the Herefords here. Look at that one again. And then that nice pull down. Here. That's good. Small little things, dimensional things, I'll probably notice as I get going, And again, it also goes into how much work you're going to put into it. I love this painting. I'm going to put a little bit more work into it. And so I'll straighten up some areas. Add a few extra little tones and little things. But now we're going to get into the movement. And I love the grasses that I put into that painting there. Some of my favorite kinds of grasses. And I do them all different kinds of ways. You've seen me do it. But I like to be quick with it. And the first thing I'm going to do really is take my extender. And let's take... and some burnt siennas, some blues, a little bit of this colors here. Reinforce our cast shadows here, right? So our cast shadows through some of these areas. Here, maybe a streak or two of color. Especially up in here, I'll use the extender so it's nice and thin here. But I do like doing this with open medium as well. Let's put in some yellows, some of the other colors that we want to come forward here. Some yellows, some extenders, some yellows here. So this is our cast shadow color, right? Well, a little bit of that light. And I'll set up some of the streaks and stuff that I want. But so I'm adding very strong and very colorful horizontals before I come in and building it, before I come in and add my verticals. So we'll add some shadows, just some movements and stuff here, right? And then as I go back, you've seen me before, as I go back, I get softer and softer with those. But I will put some of these yellows. You might want to put a little bit of green, like I said earlier, into some of that. Yellows into greens. These are kind of pretty colors here. like that. Okay, now as you go into the grasses, so I've showed you all different kinds of ways with the grasses. My big brush, the bristle brush. Well, one of my favorite ways is to just take this brush and so I model this stuff up, model all of this up. I'm gonna have to get some more white here, and I keep the actual movement of it really, really simple, but thicker. Now the paint is thicker, so anything. You add open medium to this, right? And I'll come in here like this and add some of it. Now, a couple ways to do it. One of my favorite ways is just with a paper towel. Just to pull down with the paper towel like this and set up. Don't lose all your shadows. Sometimes pull horizontal, but just set up grass movements like that. You can also take this brush and just, make little hits like this. And as I go up into the background, I'll get smaller and smaller hits there. And if you get, and I love this way, if you get too much, you can take out with a horizontal shadow and pull back down through it again. It works so well. So you pull and pull down, and you're going to build these grasses. But using a paper towel gives you these very small, thin verticals. And I try to vary it a little bit so I don't, if you just put it on evenly, you won't get nice lines. And so I try to vary it a little bit so I'll get some different lines. And if you cover up a hoof or something too much, you can just take some water and wipe it out because the hooves and stuff are dry. But I will cover some of them up here as I'm going through here like this. And just start adding the grasses this way. A lot of fun. So this has become by far my favorite way to add grasses. And then, like I said, if you cover up too much, you can go back and do it. There's a hoof, there's a leg back there that I want to make sure that we see clearly, because there's nothing worse than a three-legged cow. Here, let's put a little light on that edge. There, so you see that. There. That little cow leg coming back there. That's kind of neat. And so I'll probably come back, work on some of these forward cows and stuff a little bit more as I'm doing that. Adding some of this. I just love how it's so unique, different. So a little bit more light, hit a few areas of some more light like that, and just pull through, and that'll make a few other lighter grasses like that. You could also use like a bristle brush. A lot of artists use the bristle brush to create those, but I love this look of the grasses. And you see that it looks like those grasses, So a few other little lights there. And then you can add small little blurbs of, with the liner brush. You can add a few if you want. I don't really do that. I find that this really does a nice job of creating the grasses. Now as I come back further, so I'll make them softer, smaller movements, and just blur them a little bit like this. So I get smaller movements, some horizontals and some verticals, so the grasses get softer going back here, right? Add a little bit of open medium to this so it stays wet. It'll stay wet and very, very friendly for you to do this for quite a long time, right? So here we go. And then as I go back here, then I stop with a lot of the verticals and I just do some streaky lines. So they start out big and then they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I'm going to do that. And we'll come back and I'll show you some of the final little finishing up stuff, okay? And through the magic of video, I'll be done in just a second. I'll see you in just a minute. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, well, I got it done. It's been another day though. It's been just a hectic day. Putting up Christmas lights, getting all ready for Thanksgiving. It's been a busy time here at the studio. Anyway, I got it all done. And a couple of things that I did here is I went back through and softened just a couple areas. And you soften by giving that halftone, halfway between here, you know, the two values that you're showing here. So if you're showing like a value 4 and you're showing like a value 8, then you're going to go in there with like a 6 and just kind of tap a little bit of that around, soften it out. But I love to leave the roughness to them, and I love how both cows came out a little bit different from each other. And I did go back in onto his face right up here, and I added a little bit more light because it was drying down. Now the other thing I did is I originally followed that drawing of his arm bending out a little bit, and I just didn't like it bending out quite so much. So what I did was just took a little bit of my background here and straightened out his arm just a little bit. So it's not quite out as far as there, brings it back more in line with his body right here. So, and I liked that a little bit better. So anyway, just a couple of little touches here and there, and you know, just kind of finished him all up. I kept the grass a little bit more simple than what I have done on some of the others. So if you like some more of that movement into the grass, go take a look at some of the videos I did, the westerns I did, especially last year, some of the grasses and stuff on them, and you can add even more dimension to those grasses. But I kept this kind of you know, the movement of the grasses, but softer so that it didn't compete with the cows. That's what I wanted. And I originally wanted to have a little bit more green into there, you know, because they're moving off the cattle off, you know, for the winter. But I ended up having more of the brown, and I like it. I like overall the brown. A few little touches of green, but not very many. But anyway, heck of a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun painting. I'm glad you stuck around all the way to the end on this painting with me. I'm going to do some more. I'm going to do some smaller ones, quicker ones between now and Christmas that you can, because I had some that was like, we'd like to do some more, because a couple years ago on the channel I showed some painting for Christmas, things that you could get done real quick as Christmas presents. So we're going to do a little bit of that. I also have a color theory one coming, and we have the first framing video coming up, and hopefully that'll be up beginning of next week. Okay, so if you have comments or something, make sure you leave them down below. Make sure you click like and that little bell and subscribe. I'm going to sign this one and yeah, give it a coat of varnish and then go frame it. And I'll put a picture of the final and the framed in the those of you that are members of the channel. I'll go put it in over there. And again, those of you that are members, I also did put the drawing, my original drawing in. And I added the cows and stuff to. Oh, that's the other thing. I added a couple cows back there, a couple right back here, just little ideas of them back through there. I think it just kind of completes the whole thing. But anyway, thanks very much, guys, for joining me. Thank you very much for supporting this channel again through another year. And we really, really appreciate it. Those of you that would like to collect something, don't forget we have the gallery sale starting the 1st of December over on the JansenArtGallery.com. Okay, thanks so much, guys. And I'll see you on the very next video. Okay, bye-bye.